Hey, what's going on, everybody? As always, hope everyone's doing well. I hope everyone is enjoying your day. Um, I don't know how it is for guys that's watching, depending on where you're watching in the world. But the heat wave. Some certain parts of the states got different weather phenomenons. Excessive heat in one place. You got droughts in another place. You got heavy rain and flooding in another part of the country. Just hope everyone's being safe. Hope everyone's if you're in the heat, staying cool. Depending on where you at in the world, I'm in a place where ain't no AC in the homes. It's because of the place I'm at doesn't get hot often, so it's a little bit challenging with the heat wave and stuff, but it's all good. I just hope everyone's being safe and hydrating and staying cool if you're in a heat wave. Those are dealing with flooding and other issues, I just hope y'all being safe. I know it's been a minute since I've been on this channel. For those who tune in to Real Building Community Trust, this YouTube channel is hopefully empowers you to look into what's going on around you, community activism, getting involved, education, motivation to make a change if needed, especially in these times. You got a lot going on in the country, so definitely change is needed, right? Excuse me. A lot going on in our state and local politics, governments. So I hope this content empowers you to take a look and stimulate thought, and hopefully get you to see what's going on around you. For those who've been tuning in, thank you as always. I'm grateful for the whoever watches this. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe to the channel if you have not, so this algorithm can spread, so people can reach, can get to what's needed. So I'm just gonna come here out real quick. It's interesting. I've been following the news, and if you haven't been paying attention, you see the government structure. You have different parties and different branches of government turning in on each other, and it's interesting because our leaders are so divided when it comes to certain issues. And understanding what's best for the people of this country, and also, dealing with all the backlash from that, depending on what side you stand on in regards to issues. And it's interesting because I've seen a trend in watching certain things, and when it comes to our government systems, whether state, local, or federal, and you can tell there's definitely some backlash. There's some backbiting. There's some I guess, them turning on each other, going against each other when it comes to certain issues. So kind of going to go ahead and redefine some things. This is basic stuff. I mean, this is your civics course. This is your 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, civics course stuff. So there's nothing new about this, but I want to reiterate some of these terms because this helps kind of put things in perspective in regards to dealing with what's going on. And excuse me for the sniffles. I'm a little under the weather. This heat and switching of weather is giving me a little bit, a little bit under the weather. But nevertheless, we're gonna put this out. So I want to talk about the judicial, legislative, and executive branches. Right? Again, this is basic stuff. This is something everyone should know already. But we want to define it because we got to understand roles and perspective. So, legislative branch is the draft proposed. Their roles is to draft proposed laws, confirms or rejects presidential nominations for heads of federal agencies, federal judges, and the Supreme Court, and has authority to declare war. So this is your Congress, Senate, your House. These are the ones that are drafting and bringing these laws to the forefront. If your local congressman for the state that you're living in proposes a law to Congress, then they review and they vote to whatever law is being passed. So that's your legislative branch. That's nominations. They select the Supreme Court justices, federal court judges, and also they deal with the war side, military action. So this is one aspect of the legislative branch. Judicial branch is the third branch of government, and is made up of the Supreme Court, Circuit Court, the magistrate, local, and municipal city courts. The judicial branch interprets the laws. The state judges are elected by citizens rather than being appointed. This is interesting because it's a state now, not federal. The judges are selected by the people. This is election season. It's coming up again. Midterms are coming up in November, whether it's federal, local, or state, and there are people running for these positions. So for the state level, these are, you know what I'm saying, your people that are going to be in charge and in position. Right? So they interpret federal laws, judicial branch, resolve legal disputes, assess the innocence or guilty of a person based on criminal laws. That's your judicial branch. And that's your Supreme Court. And again, I'm going some with this because we got to define what these roles and responsibilities are in regards to which branch does what. So this is your Supreme Courts. This is your court system. They interpret, they review, they have precedent law set, and then they move into, we talk about Roe versus Wade being unconstitutional, and it's brought down to the state level. This is one of the biggest turns for the Supreme Court. And this is caused such a black backlash that now, again, we're moving into branches turning on each other, right? So the executive branch carries out and enforces the laws, includes the president, vice president, the cabinet, executive departments, independent agencies, and other boards, commissions, and committees. They carry and enforce the law. So you have President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, and many other people that's in position to enforce and carry the laws out. So you have three organizations working with each other to establish the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and order and structure in our country, right? So what's interesting is going back to these branches, right? Now you see with the overturnment of Roe versus Wade and being passed down to the state level, which is, again, it's a back and forth thing, because back in 1963, it was went from state to federal, and now it's back to state. It caused such a rift that Supreme Court justices are being targeted. One is already was a death threat, attempt to try to take one of the Supreme Court justice's life. And then now, they're blackballing Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. So the interesting thing about it is that views and opinions or beliefs, whether conservative or liberal, is causing a rift. And now the other branches are now trying to enforce laws or executive orders to try to shadow a mirror, or in a sense, reestablish things that were in place before when it comes to abortion, right? So now they're passing a bill to limit Supreme Court justices and counseling and having venues pulled for Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. And he was teaching at George Washington University as a law professor. So a lot of articles are pulled up that now petitions were signed because he spearheaded a lot of these different change. And not only was he was part of the overturnment for abortion rights, but also now he's targeting same-sex marriage, same-sex relationships, and also interracial marriage, and also targeting contraception, ability to obtain contraception. So all of these things were looked at. So now the other branches don't want that because it affects the culture and society of where we live at today. So now, with the petition signed, due to what happened with him and his stance on things, it caused that his seminar at GWU was canceled. He was blackballed. He was let go. What he was doing, teaching and paying back to the community, now he's no longer can do that because of his stance. And it shows where this country's going in sense of belief and views. There's a lot of division, and it's causing people to turn on each other. Right? You have state and local government officials going back and forth. You have a lot of different high-profile politicians standing up for certain rights, and they're being in the forefront because of what was changed. So with that, we have to understand that it affects the order of our government's institution. So with the law, the Term Act, it's interesting because a lot of the Supreme Court justices were around during some of these different terms that were passed. So I'm sure, some of these justices were around in 1963 when Roe vs. Wade was passed, dealt with then, just like they're around now for this one. So with the knowledge and the experience of interpreting the law, it's causing outlook to change. We have a new generation of people, and we have more liberalism than ever, and people want to change the way things are done. So people that are still operating in a certain mindset, and I'm not here to advocate whether which one's good or bad, but it causes people to be forced out of the seats. So with this new term act, the Supreme Court Tenure Establishment and Refinement Modernization Act established term limits for Supreme Court justices while preserving constitutional protections for judicial independence in decision making, or to restore balance in reference to liberalism or conservatism. Right. So now the Congress, again, they're part of the legislative branch. They're trying to pass a law because they have, and it's interesting because they have the ability to deal with who is selected. They have the ability to deal with who was put in those positions for the Supreme Court. And that's who determines. They determine who sits there. So if you have one agenda or political agenda, and you have views and certain goals that you're trying to accomplish, you're going to put people in positions that's going to support those goals and those agendas. You have more Democratic people sitting in the seat. They're going to push more certain agendas. They're going to honor certain views. If you have more Republican or conservative views in the White House, in Congress, or the Supreme Court, they're going to look into different views, as such as this with Roe vs. Wade, abortion rights. And it all comes from a religious standpoint, right? And unfortunately, again, people have their opinions about that, and people have their feelings, and it caused so much uprift with people in this country that it's so much division that when the next election comes, whether state, local, or federal, it's going to affect all the way down the board of who's selected in these positions. It is the retired Supreme Court justices that has been sitting in the seat for more than 18 years, and they were appointed justices by presidents that have who lost the popular vote, and now they are basically putting down ideas and agendas that are imposing on the people of America, right? So when judges are selected by the legislative, executive branches, they remain in office during the term changes, and they have certain views, and they look at law a certain way, they interpret the law, and they make the decisions made. So with this change, and with many others, they're now targeting because of what the people are dealing with. I mean, we talk about the abortion rights with the 10-year-old that was raped and she was pregnated. So that started a big thing. So now the other branches are now, like, certain states are not going to honor abortion, right, due to what the Supreme Court justice did. And now it's causing such a rift with people that now the government's going to try to turn on the Supreme Court justice. So you see the order structure of government being shifted. It's affecting every level. State level, local level, and federal level, right? If this law is passed, it's going to give the ability for certain justices to be retired, and they're going to replace them with certain agendas and rules. And if they do that, then certain agendas are going to be pushed, and it's going to continue to offset of how this country is going to be. I kind of want your thoughts, right? Should the Supreme Court have limited tenure? Should they be elected by the people, not appointed by the president? Should politics meddle with constitutional law or the Bill of Rights or our Constitution? Should Congress make new laws to counteract with what the Supreme Court has rescinded and made changes to? Again, this is very basic stuff. This is basic stuff, and at the end of the day, who we vote for with the right mindset, the majority, that's who's gonna be dealing with our affairs, right? You see crime, you see law enforcement. You know, I watch the news daily, and I see so much going on with deaths. You know, crime, law enforcement. It was interesting in Seattle. There was this guy that just going after women, and the police is like, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, if they reported this guy to the police, and it's 7-8 women harassed later, what is the police doing? You know, it's like, what is the limitations for law enforcement today? All that has to do with not only just what happened to consequences, but the very government, our order, our structure. Other questions: can the president override the Supreme Court justices? Can Congress do it? The president can't interfere with the overseeing of the law due to Supreme Court, but have an appellate jurisdiction over all laws, federal court cases, as well as state court cases that involve a point of federal law. The president can't override the laws of changes that they make, but they can get involved in who they're selected. They can get involved to who he has the power, who they can select and keep in office. So if they decide to take a stance and make changes to what they think it needs to be changed, then their response is going to be like, all right, I'm going to oust you out of the seat. And I'm going to replace you and put someone else that's going to have my same ideas. It's so important to understand the power of voting, right? And even with that, it's limitations, because people try to mix stuff up. People try to make changes. And understanding your beliefs. And this is why this is good to get involved in your community and see what's going on, because for certain views, taking a stance for what is right. It's interesting. Again, I'm just sitting back looking at this stuff, and I'm seeing the government structure again deteriorate. The foundation of what America is deteriorating because of viewpoints and a culture of society. Just like with prayer in schools, just like with religious organizations and religious structure in dealing with prayer. It used to be one thing, and now they took it out. Separation of church and state. But now they're trying to incorporate it back in schools for people standing for what's right. But there's resistance in some areas, and in some there's not. And you gotta understand too, where you're living in, they determine the laws too. Depending on where you live, certain laws can be passed that affect those people that live there. And that determines how quality of life is going to be. That determines what can be done or what cannot be done. What's a crime? What's not a crime? You know what I'm saying? What resources you have or what not resources you have. You know, what is some of the different access points to obtaining what you need versus not having those access points. It all determines by the laws that are passed. So it's important to read and learn and understand who's doing what. And for you to put the ticket in and vote for these state congressmen and judges and Supreme Court personnel. Who you vote for your local magistrate and these city council people, right? And all these different things, it's important to understand their viewpoints because they're going to have access to the federal government. It's like this guy presented, I forgot who he was. Let's see if I can pull up. He's definitely a Democrat, but he, actually a group of Democrats is one that did the spearhead Citizen Sheldon Whitehouse for Rhode Island. That's one of the names that come up for putting term limits on Supreme Court justice tenures, right? So these congressmen that we're voting for statewide, they can go to Congress and present terms and laws to be passed. And if they're strong enough and they're voted on by both House and the Senate, then they can become law, and that's how it's established. Now, how the system works is, when it comes to the Supreme Court, say a law it goes through your local court. You go to court, civil case, criminal case. You have precedent law that's already been reviewed before in history. And then it gets moved up to, you got your local, state, circuit court, district, federal, then eventually it makes its way to the Supreme Court. And they review the laws that are passed, and they interpret the law from precedent laws that was already passed before, and they determine whether that law is unconstitutional, or they send it back to state level to reassess, appeals court, and that's how stuff gets changed. So one law is passed in one branch, and then when an issue in the court system goes up to Supreme Court, they review and interpret, and then they can rescind or change, or they can kick it back to state in appeals and for review, and let the state level handle that particular judgment upon that particular situation. So this is why it's important to understand the process and understand how it works, because this is how America is going to move forward, depending on who's in office, depending on who is selected. So with all the catfighting and emotional overload when it comes to dealing with the government structure, it's going to affect American people in many ways. Just like Roe versus Wade, it's affecting people all over, it's affecting people statewide. You know, it's to the point where you got to, you know, people's talking about how they got to go take a bus, Greyhound bus, or go to another state to get abortions done. You know, it's again not right, wrong, and different. But you see how laws play and how they affect people. So I would just say, pay attention to these things and look at these things and review your laws in your local, state, and federal districts, and be mindful in your communities how that affects you, how that affects your next door neighbor, how that affects where you live. Because how you live is going to determine what's passed is going to determine how you live. You know what I'm saying? It's going to determine what you cannot do. It's going to determine what is a crime. What is a civil what is civil charges or sued or criminal aspects to it. It's going to affect that, right? So I hope this stimulates thought. If you want to leave your feedback in there, some of the stuff I put out, you know, it's welcome to do so. It's just interesting, like you see, especially when it comes to crime, the crime spikes. They're getting politicians are getting blamed. The state, local, and federal entities are getting blamed for the crime, right? The district attorneys are selected. That's a part of voting, right? They're the ones that force the criminal justice system in aspects of for crimes. If you have one that's not doing his job, or you have one that's not really putting forth justice, it's just like the guy in New York with the bodega incident. He stabbed and killed a guy because he was being harassed, and you know what I'm saying, older guy, but the district attorney wanted to charge him, and then the charge was dismissed. And a back and forthness, because it depends on who is what, who is doing what, who is in office. Those individuals selected are the ones that's going to dictate life. It's to the point where you can't even defend yourself without being charged because of who was in office. You can't do certain things. You can't, your rights to defend your person, property, papers, you can't do that now because of certain people in office. They want to enforce certain laws or certain rules. It all comes down to knowing who is doing what. From the president, people just look at the president. They look at certain figures on TV or certain high-level ranking officials, but they don't look at your state and your local people. Them the ones that's in your town, that's in your city courthouses. Them the ones that's down the street from you that are enforcing the laws in the local level, the state level. Though they matter just as much as federal. Even more so now, because a lot of stuff is probably being handed down back to the state level. It's very important to understand that. Who is doing what is in your communities. You know what I'm saying? So as voting, as you're electing your officials, midterms or not, you know what I'm saying? Think about these things. Think about your viewpoints. Think about like what's matters to you. You know what I'm saying? Those hot topics. You know, crime, that's a hot topic now because people getting slaughtered. It don't matter what age group it is. It don't matter. It don't matter if you're a child to an elder. It doesn't matter now. So if crime is a hot topic, then you need to find somebody who's going to really enforce those crimes. If somebody's going to strengthen law enforcement, and then find if it's a hot topic for police brutality or dealing with law enforcement mistreating civilians, tearing down the community trust between the civilians and the police department. If that's a hot topic, then that's need to be addressed with your officials, those mayors, those city council, those judges, those district attorneys, those sheriffs. You vote for sheriffs. They the ones that look into this. If school security is a hot topic, then that's something that you need to bring up to your officials. What are you going to do about safety and security for our schools? What are you going to do about crime? What are you going to do about medical rights? What are you going to do about taxes and you know what I'm saying, different things that you know, resources to Medicaid and resources to government assistance? If that's something that is a hot topic, is government assistance something that is doesn't need to be looked at? Is be taken out? Is that a hindrance to to the community? It's just certain things that you got to ask. Not saying that it is, but again, these are things that you got to analyze in your head, man. So this is my thoughts on it. I hope that people are paying attention and looking at these things. The way the federal government is exemplifying structure and order, because the government job is to provide order and structure for a nation or a state or a city or a township or a county, however jurisdiction it falls under. They're the ones that establish order. So if the order structure is crumbling and you having one agency going against another agency because of them taking a stance on what they think is right, it corrodes the American freedom aspect. I can't make changes for what I see is better, and it may not always be a utilitarianistic approach. It may not always be the greater good for everybody, but this is what I think is right. But I'm getting shunned by my counterparts because you don't like something. You don't like, you want to have an agenda. You worried about numbers. You worried about your poll numbers. You worried about, certain things instead of looking at what's right. You know what I'm saying? So it's just stuff like that. Look at the order and structure crumbling, man. Like, look at it. Eventually, ain't gonna be no. It's gonna be lawlessness. It's already lawlessness in certain places. Some mayors and government officials can't handle what they got going on in their cities. They can't handle the crime. They can't handle the stuff that's going on because there's so much lawlessness. Crime is on the uptick. You got your police chief, your mayors, your sheriffs, county sheriffs. They're under fire. You know what I'm saying? They're pressured because they're trying to control the crime in their area. They have short staffing. People are getting out and not want to deal with law enforcement. It's too stressful. It's dangerous. People are taking matters in their own hands. You know what I'm saying? The home structure is being attacked. You know what I'm saying? The government structure is crumbling, man. So you have to look at these things and educate yourself. You can't be like, oh, it don't matter. If you want change, you got to sit down and look at it. If you want things to be as they are, then keep picking these people that are not going to do what's needed. So that's all I got. I hope this video stimulates thought. Please, again, share. Continue to monitor in your communities. Continue to educate people in your communities. It's down to the kids, all the way to the elders. It don't matter if you're middle class, lower class, upper class. It doesn't matter. Get involved. Especially if you're in a realm of influence. So that's all I got, guys. I hope you're being blessed. Hope this helps you, and we'll catch you on the next one.